issue up to 1.5 spots if you have extenuating circumstances, not a lot of public parking nearby, etc. We brought the density requirement from 5 to 4, and we still have a lot of exemptions about where there's no development. We're not requiring development to occur. A lot of the other changes were small, and that brings us to page 22, or is it starting 20? It starts on 20.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ellen Czechowski, Office of Legislative Counsel, draft 8.1. The first Act 250 section is starts at the bottom of page 20. But the first change is on the top of page 22.
So
that's
Madam Chair,
yeah.
Because I have a change that I'm requesting at the bottom of page 20 onto 21.
So it's not there yet. So we're starting there.
Right. So my question is, where would you like me to address my density, my drive to smart growth and growth areas?
I think
right here.
We can go through all of the concerns. I might open my computer because I'm trying to write things down for different sections. And I do want to flag for everyone, because I hope I don't run the clock out and forget, but we also have Pat from JFO, so that before we finalize, we can look at what he's done, a rough spreadsheet of all of our appropriations, aspirational appropriations here in this bill, just mostly in sum, and we can, that's going to be important before this goes to editors, but just want to flag that. I think we can start section by section and go through.
My only concern with that is the appropriations we're discussing with David, and that's tomorrow.
He's just going to give us a spreadsheet, so we have that on hand. David's
just saying that those are
yeah.
David's sections.
Yeah.
So
but there will still be final tweaks tomorrow. Oh, here. Okay, I'll hold on to it for now. But it's good to know the price tag of our
ka-ching.
Aspirational.
So my concern has always been that we focus, that for me, this bill is all about reducing barriers to development in our smart growth centers in our villages and downtowns, and that we further protect undeveloped parts of our state, because we're going to need them more as we drive the density in our downtown and village centers. So for me, this is very concerning to be able to lift this cap to 25. This is for development anywhere. So I have spoken with the chair and with Ellen, and I believe Ellen has some language drafted, but I would feel much more comfortable with this section if we were driving it into our designated growth centers and to the towns that use our bylaw modernization to identify smart growth areas. So that is what I would like us to consider in section 16, at the beginning of section 16. The priority housing, lifting the cap, that is a big deal. We just did the work on this last year to raise the cap. The chair, I am, because priority housing projects have to be in designated downtowns and village centers, I feel less compelled to unstrike that, but I am concerned about this ability to grow this not in our growth centers or in our smart growth areas. So that is the change I am asking for us to consider.
And that's at the top of page 21.
Right.
It's where we have 10 by 5 by 5, the only place where you still have a constraint of 5 years, 5 miles.
Right.
You're proposing keep that where it is at 10.
No, I'm proposing if we're going to go to 25, that we.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
I'm only okay with going to 25 if we have a language that ties it to the areas we've identified for smart growth.
Okay.
Who's identified? Like,
oh, Scott.
Oh, great.
Oh my God, Scott, you are divine.
I really hope that I drafted it. Well, I'm sorry, I feel like in a haze, but I think I drafted everything you just said. So it would be the words would be a small change. But
Right.
yes, it would be shifting keeping the 10 units or going to 25 units if you're located in a growth center, or an area that has been identified as a smart growth area as part of the bylaw modernization process.
Right.
And is that an existing, that's an existing.
So-
Okay, who has identified it as a smart growth area?
So the smart growth designation is one of the other state designations, like a downtown or a neighborhood development area. So it's an official state designation, and there are currently 6 towns that have it.
Growth centers or?
Growth.
Okay,
growth-
but it's the town planning commission or select board who says this is a smart growth area.
Oh, so smart growth area, so there's 2 things that are happening here. So
Okay.
yes, the town, in either case, is the one making the decision. They have to apply, the town has to apply to the state board to have a growth center designated.
Oh, okay, growth, and there's 6 growth centers.
Yes.
Okay, but an area designated for smart growth.
Yeah, so last year when you did the bylaw modernization bill, you
Mhm.
added a requirement that states, or that towns identify in their bylaws areas for smart growth. And those were the areas in the language of that statute that would require additional zoning provisions, including density. And so the town is identifying the areas that are for smart growth. There aren't as many restrictions on that. There aren't very many requirements, but it's
Mhm.
part of the bylaw modernization process.
Does anyone want to be heard on that in the room? Because I just feel like that's why I asked a lot of people to be here for markup in case there was a concern about what we meant by an area plan for smart growth or any of these provisions. Senator Cummings.
The question that I've had for years, because we keep talking about designated downtowns. Has anybody calculated exactly how much housing we could squeeze into designated downtowns? Is there, I mean,
This
is that?
is, this is a growth center, which is.
Yeah, no,
much
I'm just
bigger.
asking you
Yeah.
to talk about this.
Yeah,
Because it's really easy to
Mhm.
say, no, I've got my big 3 acres up here and you're not putting your quadruplex below me.
mhm.
While we're making everything, putting everything in downtown areas
Mhm.
or smart growth as defined by the town, have we ever calculated exactly how many housing units we can do that in?
I'm gonna
Because
let the commissioner.
Well,
Do we
direct drop in for Commissioner Housing and Community Development. Don't know if there's a calculation on that because how tall are you gonna go, what's allowed, but what I will say and remind folks is that of our 9,600 square miles in Vermont, only 41 are in all these designated areas. And remind folks that if we restrict this going up to 25, that developers that are even redeveloping existing properties, such as the Hales you heard with VHEB, using existing structures, this is still gonna cap them at 10. Because not all those dilapidated properties that could be reinvested and provide housing, and maybe it's not quote smart growth areas, but places that have already been developed would be excluded if this restriction is applied. I think we're leaving a lot of areas off the table that already have properties that could be converted to housing that would run afoul of this. And we've seen people run into 10 units are already hitting this issue. So I think that's the concern. It just doesn't open up enough area to really meet the acute housing crisis that we have at the moment, including existing properties that could be converted to housing that certainly don't result in new development. So I think that's a challenge.
One question, and I want Maura to speak, and then I'll go back to you, Senator Clerk. It's
Yeah.
your provision, but what if we just said they had done bylaw modernization of some sort, not that they have designated it a smart growth area?
That would certainly open up, because when we have 57 communities that have received bylaw modernization grants, not all of them are through their process. I guess I was further asked is that after they've gone through the process and have officially updated, their zoning,
Mhm.
or just have been approved? I guess you need some clarifier on timing there. That
Right.
would certainly open up more area, and folks that are thinking about zoning, so that's better than not having that there.
Maura.
Maura Collins, Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I was just gonna say ditto to everything Josh said, and the original language really matches the needs of the communities in the housing situation. I think there is a lot of work that is, a lot of good thinking went into this, and so I just wanna say what he said. He said it better.
Well, that's part of the problem, is that it can be anywhere. That is exactly the problem. And so for those of us who are actually concerned that it not be anywhere, for me, a growth center is a fairly good sized swath of, for the crowds that have identified growth centers, that is sort of a ring around the designated downtown. So it's not as constrained as the downtown. My concern here is that that's anywhere. That could be in the middle of anywhere. And so unless you tie it to something that's either already exists, or,
So it can be anywhere the town is designating it can be. It's just removing Act 250. Right? I mean, the town can say, we want your larger housing project here. You're not gonna hit Act 250 by doing this.
with 25 units or fewer, that's a lot of units in the middle of nowhere.
I mean,
I'll let Karen speak because she hasn't yet.
Yeah, thank you. Karen Horn with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So it seems to me that you would want to let municipalities designate smart growth areas or something like
Right.
that. And they're not going to seek designation for all of those areas that are designated, but they are going to be compact
Identified.
settlement areas, so you've only got 23 designated downtowns and 6 growth centers right now, and then you've got the villages and the other stuff. But it's, if you want to expand the availability of housing, you would make it clear that a town could designate a smart growth area, and that would have the advantage of these Act 250.
Right, so this language alone doesn't really tell them how we're defining.
I think you need to say,
Yeah.
or who's designated. Make that very clear.
I think it's,
Very designated by the, yeah.
I would just add that I think that, the challenge of our housing crisis, we need more housing units. And this does in no way, shape, or form remove the restrictions that already exist. There's many places that will not be developed even if you allow this. It's got deer wintering habitat. It's a wetland. It's a steep bank. It's along a river corridor. This isn't open, endless housing development gone rampant. I think that, the fact that we have a 10-5-5, we are choosing to not build the housing we need because we don't want to see more housing units. It doesn't take away the fact that you need to get all the existing permits, deal with stormwater management, deal with all those other natural resource concerns, deal with the increased RV standards. We're handling those concerns, in my view, already. What we're not doing is allowing more housing to be developed where it's needed. And the state is throttling that development despite the acute need in the crisis we're having. And that to me just is the balance that we've never moved towards, the balance of actually allowing the housing that we need built as opposed to protecting the resources. I think that anything you could do to expand those areas beyond what is mentioned right now, because that literally will just keep the same 41 square miles.
no, I beg to differ. I mean, a smart growth area could be actually quite a bit more than this. I don't think that that will be more area that can be developed. We fundamentally disagree. We absolutely have a housing crisis. We absolutely need to direct where we grow our housing. I don't agree that it should be, Anna's talked about all the way to the apple orchard and then a development in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that's not
It's
what we
not in
want
the
to be
middle
doing.
of Nowhere. It is tucked in. I mean, I'm thinking, we spent the first half of this bill trying to stop towns from doing restrictive zoning. Well, what we're zoning, what they're restricting, and I've been on all of the commissions, is poor white people. Nobody wants a low-income housing project in their town because it causes trouble in their schools and it causes trouble.
But
All right. So we're saying, all right, you have to allow denser zoning. You have to put it in downtown. You can't be restricted. Well, if we say the only place you can get around Act 250 is in a smart growth area, and the town doesn't wants to be restrictive, then they just won't designate any. We like it the way it is, and there's no smart growth areas in our town.
I'll let Peter go, and I have a thought.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Peter Tucker with the Realtor Association. So, I think that, that we want to encourage development in certain areas. One of the things that Growth Center doesn't necessarily do or doesn't include village centers, can, but there's only 6 of them right now. But including village centers, I see the 10-5-5 rule as something that's going to be far more impactful in smaller communities, where the builder doesn't have to leave town to continue to build individual properties in the area. It's not a 25 unit or 24 unit development, but rather 2 here, 3 there, 4 there, that all of a sudden accumulate to a point where they had to enter Act 250. So, including downtowns, village centers, the places where you want to encourage
The
growth,
infill.
make it complete though, not just growth centers and downtowns or neighborhood development areas. Make sure you've got all those communities covered.
So I have a compromise thought, which is, first of all, I think maybe, I could be wrong, that the designated growth center piece might belong in the next section where we talk about you can do 25 in downtowns, village centers, and neighborhood development areas. So we could move that, and then we could say 10 or more units or 25 where bylaws exist. I don't know where zoning exists. Like, I don't know if it's where they're
in towns with
modernized.
zoning,
In towns with zoning.
You're not gonna
You
get
could do that.
housing in
I'd be okay
Williamstown.
with that.
That was the point my planning commission made.
Okay.
It's not the local zoning.
Mhm.
There is no housing going up in Williamstown, which has no zoning.
Okay.
It's the fear of Act 250, and if you put up 5 houses and 5 houses, and there's some nice little clustered areas that you then are into Act 250.
So they're not doing zoning because they.
No, I don't
But
know
that's-
why Williamstown's
Oh, okay.
Williamstown.
Okay.
They're not mine. I don't know.
I don't want to do legislation because people are afraid of Act 250. We've heard that there's no reason to be afraid of Act 250. There are a few things that have been challenging with Act 250, but on the whole, Act 250 does its job. And
That's what people are afraid of.
yeah, right. But we also have heard that the speed with which most Act 250 permits go through, and I think that there is a myth that is greater than the reality with Act 250. All I'm trying to do is make sure we have that we green light more housing in appropriate areas. That is really my objective here.
So Williamstown could do 10 by 5 by 5, and the towns that have zoning could do 25 by 5 by 5. But you think that, like, they could still do the 10, but they want to do 20.
no one's doing it.
Well, but
Okay.
it already exists that they can do this,
I know, and they're not.
but that's their challenge. That's their,
Okay.
so you think that if we put it to 25, they would all of a sudden miraculously start developing
I
housing?
think you would see people, developers, putting up housing, more housing. Right now, whether you can argue that Act 250 is not the problem. The mindset, the public belief, we had this thing about people being afraid to speak to us this morning. The public belief is if you go into Act 250, it's going to cost you a lot of money. You have to hire engineers and architects and landscape architects, and you have to do all of that. 11 months is a building season in Vermont, and right now your materials are probably gone up a third. That keeps people from doing it. I can tell you, because I was the mayor, Montpelier did not put sidewalks on Berlin Street when we redid it as far up as the Federal Transportation Agency, who was funding it, required, because if we put like 10 more feet of sidewalk up there, we would have triggered Act 250 and that road wouldn't have been repaired. And we couldn't drive the ambulance on it. It was so unsafe. It wouldn't have been repaired for over a year. That's how extreme it gets. This was just a sidewalk. And that's the mindset that's there. And Act 250 was meant to stop housing. That was the development we were afraid of.
It was meant to be thoughtful, hopefully, about how we develop. I think at its best, it was meant for us to be thoughtful about how
We have more opportunities to litigate all of Act 250.
Right, yes.
Let's let Ann finish her point and then
Okay,
we should call.
I
it
just think that in some ways we're dealing in a fantasy that we're going to be able to solve this problem by putting everything, and we're really talking about a lot of lower cost or lower income housing in our designated downtowns. I think that we are going to have to allow some development for middle income housing, for people with families of slightly higher than poverty incomes. And we're good, we want to be smart about it.
Right.
And you may want to cluster it and you may want it more densely. If you go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they have mansions and they've got 10 feet between the houses.
Well, look at New York City, which has.
But New York City is New York City. People are coming here to get away from
Right,
it.
right. Anyway.
We have some other big sections, so I guess I'd like to hear from, because the 25 will come up again, but so it'd be good to hear from everybody.
This has got to get through.
Natural resources, yes.
There will be civil war in my.
Do people want to keep what's in 8.1, do the compromise or something similar to what I just mentioned, or move to Senator Clarkson's language?
I think the compromise that you just proposed in towns with zoning and or in towns that have adopted bylaws that have established smart growth areas.
Well,
would
that's
be
like
fine.
a lot. I just think what we heard is getting more into, have you done bylaw? We don't have a full definition of that. So zoning, it's compromise is zoning
In towns with zoning.
in towns with zoning. And then designated growth centers moves to the section beneath it.
Right, and you and I spoke so late that this is still
Mhm.
my original hope of
Yeah.
not, but I
Well,
think,
I'm just the 5, not about the priority
Right.
housing projects, but that it gets added to the list of places where 25 or more units could be constructed. And Ellen took care to point out, to try and articulate the timeline issue so that you're not just putting in a bunch of different LLCs. Are people okay with that? We say 10 by 5 by 5, but 25 if you have zoning.
or 25 if you have zoning, that takes care of a piece of my concern, yes.
Senator Harris.
But 25 if you have zoning.
Yeah, 25 by 5 by 5 if you have zoning, and then the 5 by 5 goes away if you're in one of those designated areas. The four designations that I'm aware of, we've been discussing.
And again, if you could talk about multiple towns, one has zoning and one doesn't, what happens then?
So they get to do 10, but not 25. And that's why it's open for discussion. You can say, let's just raise it to 25 and see what happens through the rest of the session with the other committees.
Do you want me to talk about campaigning in a certain neighborhood where you step over the town line?
And there's no zoning.
And one neighbor in the water and sewer is, you guess which town supplies which, but it is a contiguous cluster. It is small homes. It is the kind of development you want, but it does step over the town line.
But how do we get towns to do more zoning, which is thoughtful management of things, if we don't give them a carrot that they can develop more if they adopt
I
zoning.
think that would work better than a stick. The one thing I know is
This
using a
is a
stick
carrot.
will get an awful lot of pushback.
I believe this is a carrot.
One other option is to do 15 or 20 for the non-zoning and bump it up or something for the, I'm just trying to.
I'm
Senator
thinking that
Harrison,
whatever
Yeah.
we do, it's going to get cut down or cut
That is,
out,
I agree. So
which my vote will be contingent upon.
Well,
I think this could be something we keep in our back pockets on YouTube, but you know,
I
for
was gonna
other
say, this is
committees,
pretty public.
when they come back and cut these provisions down,
Yeah.
is this is a good
We
compromise.
can compromise.
I'm happy,
Yeah,
to compromise. I also have to vote in good conscience on this. And I am really a believer in having these in thoughtful areas and not everywhere. And so my concern is,
I
This
think
isn't-
we haven't helped the towns define thoughtful areas, which is what Karen is saying. It's very late in the game to say, make it thoughtful, you know, and put that in
So it's
statute.
implying that we think they don't make it.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
I think towns,
Senator took the words right out of my
yeah,
mouth. I
right.
mean, I think towns are doing this work today. You've heard that many times.
Mhm.
So could I just throw another squirrel into the punch bowl?
Sure.
Um,
Never heard of
this
it.
is a big punch bowl, there's a squirrel in it.
I love that.
It's a crazy expression.
Anyway, have you considered getting rid of the 5-year?
We do that in the next section.
Which is-
So anywhere you're in a designated area, the 5x5 goes away.
Yeah, because the 5 years, it has never made any sense to us.
I know.
Okay.
But we do that separately. This is like, we're just raising the limit with this 5x5. And then, but that's fair. We could take out the 5 years and just leave within 5 miles. But what Ellen did in the next section is say, okay, but you have to have some timeline, so you're not kind of just getting around the whole question of, can you just have a bunch of projects going at the same time under different LLCs or something?
Well, I think you probably could do that anyway.
I think
So where,
legal drafters, but that's moving forward. So
should we sit with this and get through the rest of the Act 250 while we think
Sure.
about this?
Yeah.
Because at the moment, the proposal that you've made, Chair, is, do you hear what she's proposing, Ellen?
well,
Or
and
25 if
Yeah,
if
and
you're in a
it's-
town with zoning?
I mostly want to, I don't know if Senator Harrison wants to speak before we move on.
There's so many moving parts.
Yes.
I guess it just concerns me because sometimes when we say Act 250, it means different things to different people.
Mhm.
Because there still will be all these permits, the stormwater permits, if you cross the threshold, that's one of the
Right.
hardest permits to get. And that's
Yes.
still around, whether or not there's Act 250.
Yeah,
And you'll need to
Soil.
hire consultants and, the paperwork will still be 3 inches. So if there's no Act 250, and just one thing that I have heard the most is that it's the appeal process
right.
that is
Yes.
really the
Yeah,
fear of getting into the Act 250 process.
and these
So-
can be appealed the same way as a huge
And
project.
we are not addressing the Act 250 appeal process in this bill. We're addressing the
Which-
zoning appeal.
So that
We're-
kind of
but
concerns
we're-
me.
We're addressing exemptions from the appeal process.
But we are getting a report on the appeals process in Act 250 in the next month or so, I believe. That
So
is
we
right,
can
too.
sit with it. I do think you're outnumbered and people are willing to hear this when it comes back to us with amendments from other committees. But we can sit with it. We
The
don't.
report on the Act 250 process, who's doing that?
So there's a report that the NRB is working on that's actually not due until December. Their
Oh, is
annual,
that?
their annual report with the timelines and the permit decisions comes out in February. So their annual report is coming out this month, but the big report that you requested is not out until December.
Sorry, I had thought it was sooner.
Senator
Let me
Harrison.
just clarify, I do support Senator Clarkson's concerns about getting development in the wrong place. I
Mhm.
think it's really important because that's a mistake where if we make it, can't be undone. So I don't want you to think I'm not supportive of that effort.
Okay,
I'm not sure how to get
okay,
there.
okay.
Sorry.
Is there
I'm
a B or C in there? Or- Okay, so we can sit on it. Yes, Alan.
And I would also add, we didn't get, there's a whole new section of
Right.
of Act 250 related
Mhm.
provisions, so I think that's,
We can take it in totality. Maybe we should try to take it all in totality because we are gonna get short on time and hear from people who have very serious concerns to raise about whether or not it's functionally possible. And then we can try to return to it.
Which piece?
I just think we should get through all of it because
Okay.
there's.
And the
Yeah.
chair and I spoke after we spoke, and the priority housing piece, the cap is, I think I'm sanguine with keeping it where we are in 8.1.
So repealing the.
Right, we're feeling,
And I think what everybody's saying we have to be realistic about is this bill has many more committees to go
yes,
to.
I have said this many times already this morning.
Okay, so,
But we will, the issue will come up again about,
right,
in another section.
so let's try to get through the highlighted sections
Because the
with
subdivision
questions.
is the next piece, right?
so.
Clarifying questions.
So the bottom of page 21 into page 22, as the chair just mentioned, I am proposing, because we did discuss it last week. So the section at the bottom of page 21 into page 22 removes the 5-year 5-mile rule for housing in downtowns, village centers, neighborhood development areas. And I don't know if this is the right language, but within a continuous period of 3 months.
You want to talk about the concern? of it?
Right, I mean, I haven't discussed this with any other lawyers, but without having any time, and maybe it's not a time, I'm just having an issue with the language a little bit about worrying because that language is not there. A developer being able to not have
Unlimited
any,
number.
right, yeah, right. So this is owner controlled by a person within 3 months.
What do they have to have accomplished? in 3 months?
The construction of 25 or more units of housing. So it would be up to 24 units of housing within 3 months is exempt from Act 250.
In all of our designated areas. And we, just flagging, if we exempted downtowns fully, we'd probably remove this here, the retention, mostly our village centers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be
It's time.
1 month. I don't know if 3 months is the right number, but just some kind of boundary on that for clarity. But
For clarity, when you say the construction of units within 3 months, do you mean the start and
Yeah,
completion of? What
no,
does
so
that
it would be
mean?
the application process.
Oh,
So,
So you
All right, that
couldn't
makes more
have-
sense, yeah.
yeah,
you couldn't have applications within 3 months of each other?
yes.
I'm looking around the room because I think this was our attempt to get rid of the 5 by 5 rule, but keep some semblance of like a limit here that you couldn't just start building 25 units everywhere and game the system. So I don't
Well,
know.
only
if
in a
anyone has
designated downtown, right?
Right. all
In a designated
areas,
something. What do you call all of these together?
designated areas,
Designated areas.
the
Okay.
DAs.
So, and I would also just flag, you did just request adding growth center to this too.
Yeah.
So that's 4 out of 5. The 5th one is Newtown Center.
Right.
Why don't we add Newtown
I
centers?
don't know if you wanted to.
Should we,
add that
or if
one
we say
or-
designated
If
areas?
you could
does
just
that
say
cover
all
of them?
designated, you
Okay.
could just say
That's
all
good to
designated.
know. I didn't.
And in the future, that could work after a study comes back that redefines all these
Right,
areas. I would really
that's
encourage.
instead of all the
If you
little,
intend all of them, just say designated areas.
Okay.
The designation may
does anyone
change.
have a problem with
Right.
that?
No,
So we're
all
saying in
the-
designated areas, you can build up to 25 units without triggering Act 250, no time limit, et cetera. But I think,
What constitutes a designated area will be redefined, so we don't know what it is.
right,
That report is due back to
Well-
us fairly soon.
There may be proposals to change it, but the actual definition of it isn't being proposed to change at any
right.
point.
But do people hear the overall legal concern that you might be able to game that quite easily into just building a lot of different projects? Or you think somehow you would like trigger,
How does waiting 3 months stop them from gaming it. I don't
Yeah.
understand how this helps.
You know,
So do you,
no, I'm just saying, this isn't written in tablets of stone.
I know, I
Now,
agree, yeah.
If we see
Mm-hmm.
stuff we don't want
Yeah.
to see, I mean, you can't build that much before we get back
Right.
here next January.
Right,
If we see things that we don't want to see happen,
mm-hmm,
then we can
right.
tighten it up a little bit.
I think, I think that's a good point to make, because Senator Harrison, I feel like we don't usually touch local stuff. That probably won't happen again unless we create a huge issue that is unforeseen, but we do touch Act 250 quite a, we nibble around the edges a lot. So if we'd come back next year if we created something,
A monster.
a monster that we didn't anticipate.
Because we create monsters and then we slay them.
I guess the response to the prior question was, you have heard testimony that a developer slowly adding units over time, over 5 years,
Mhm.
may reach the 10-unit threshold.
Mm-hmm.
Will they reach the 25-unit threshold within 3 months doing cumulative multiple projects?
Karen, you had your hand up before, now you.
It just seems to me, I'm sort of not understanding this conversation, but it seems to me that if the objective is to provide ability for people to build housing, then if they're building housing that's not gating the system, that's getting the desired result.
Sure.
So I would take the time out altogether, 3 months or anything else, because what you're allowing is for people to build housing in those places where you want housing.
Sure. What I would just make sure the committee understands what I think that's doing, what Ellen is raising is an unlimited amount of housing in all the designated.
By any
areas.
one person,
By one person.
by one person.
Well, which, I mean, it's like lifting the caps. Right now, we're lifting the caps on affordable mixed housing and but this would be, the question is, this would be lifting, I think, Commissioner.
Yeah, I think, I agree with what Karen said. I think maybe you could just define by any one person at any
Okay.
given time. So, one person couldn't have 2 24-unit developments going on at the same time.
Okay.
So by a
This is
person
where we want the
simultaneously.
housing. This is going to get at the mix of affordability, because the
Right.
PHP is all tied to affordable housing. This will allow market rate housing to be built in our designated areas where we desperately need some of that in downtown. But yet it's happening in the right place. So I think this is great.
Why
I
don't we
think you
sit
need to
with
time
this too? I just want to make sure we're dwelling on like any unintended consequences. I don't know. I think what we mean is a discrete project of 25 units or less by one person.
By
does
one
not
person.
trigger Act 250.
Or a distinct corporation, because we all know there are lots of different LLCs for every project.
Person is very well defined under Act 250. But previously there has been this location
Barrier.
within 5 miles. So you've removed the 5 miles, so it's
And we've
anywhere.
removed the 5 years.
Right.
So as long as we don't disagree on like what we're trying to get to, we can keep dwelling on this without making any unforeseen changes, and get to the next one.
And so this, 2 changes on page 22 under the definition of subdivision. So similar to the prior section, a subdivision is a tract or tract of lands owned or controlled by a person that the person has partitioned or divided for the purpose of resale into 15 or more lots located within a designated downtown within a continuous period of 3 months.
So this might have been a misunderstanding, because I think I requested this and I wanted to take out downtown and village center and leave neighborhood development area.
Oh, okay.
Because that could have been on me.
Okay.
Whatever I wrote down, just because I think it was raised like, are we gonna have a lot of large, like tracts of land where there's subdivision happening in the middle of a downtown? Probably not, but this might apply better to a neighborhood development area or a growth area.
Okay. And so just so you know, the neighborhood development area does technically include whatever core designation is within it.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, I think neighborhood
But-
development area then
Yeah.
captures it.
Yep.
And 15 was an increase from a past bill. Like, I mean, a past draft, we increased from 10 to 15. Is that what we're doing in this section?
Actually, I think a prior draft had 20. So draft 6.1 had 25.
Okay.
So in the last draft, it went down to 15, and so that hasn't changed in this draft.
Okay.
But,
And that was the original language says 10.
currently in statute, 10 or more lots in a town's zoning, or 6 or more lots in a town without zoning triggers Act 250.
Okay, so this was
That's why they aren't building in Williamstown.
there. Okay, so this might help Williamstown. So this is a kind of, well, this is in designated areas.
Yeah, I don't
so-
know if that's.
I don't know if
specifically
Williamstown will be helped by this. But this was a modest increase in the ability to subdivide without triggering Act 250. And I think it was brought up, just that when you talk about subdivision, it's probably going to be in a kind of larger neighborhood area and not necessarily in a downtown or village.
So as long as we keep neighborhood development area, I'm okay with
Okay,
that.
and we're trying to get at the timeline issue again, but we'll dwell on that a little more. Okay.
Okay, so there is new language starting on page 23. It is 4 new sections that are all related to each other. This language is nearly identical to language that was in S234 that appeared last year as introduced. It creates an enhanced designation. Under the enhanced designation, construction, development and subdivisions under Act 250 are exempt if there's an enhanced designation. An enhanced designation requires the town demonstrate that their bylaws are identical to the requirements of Act 250, or there's a little bit of a process where model bylaws are adopted to address all the Act 250 criteria. And if the municipality demonstrates that they have adopted those bylaws, or that their bylaws already cover the Act 250 criteria, and if they demonstrate that they have staff to handle the municipal permit review, they can apply for this enhanced designation where there will be full Act 250 exemption.
And so what I think this does is effectively limit duplicative appeals through both the local process and then Act 250. You are getting all of the same criteria met where that Act 250 would require, but you're doing it with one appeals process and the local, where someone can see and feel the process in their community, they would have the designation to do this without.
So, help me here.
This is the big one, so I think like 10 minutes on it. Yes, go ahead.
So so I also have something for 17, but it may not be after our previous conversation, because I had something for earlier. But are we doing the cart before the horse here if we're allowing things in enhanced designations, and yet we are doing a whole report on designated areas that hasn't come back to
I
us
guess
yet?
we're trying to be the horse instead of wait for the cart or the horse. We're just trying to lead
Right.
the process, because what we didn't hear that this would contradict what they're thinking about or somehow make what they do irrelevant. There are designated downtowns that exist, and this would be,
They're designated areas that currently exist.
yes, but this is specific to downtowns.
Right.
Yes, yeah,
So-
sorry, it's just for downtowns.
This is not every kind of designation.
And so, can we just say this again? So that if a town can demonstrate that the bylaws they've adopted fully incorporate the issues that Act 250 review includes,
All the
that
criteria.
they would then, the criteria.
I just,
The Act 250, if they fully
Yeah.
adopt Act 250 criteria, that they are then exempt
Yes,
from Act 250.
that
In that
area, yes.
In that area.
Mhm.
Downtown.
But they will have adopted will have,
They've brought on board.
they've adopted the criteria
Yeah,
that would be being
Right.
asked of them to do, address anyway.
Mhm.
Yep.
But it effectively should shrink the timeline, because you're not saying you just did this locally and are gonna do it all over again at the state level. You have done what the state would have done locally.
I mean, this is coming out of, we don't trust the locals. We know that, I mean, it is a nanny state. We tell locals, you gotta have bylaws, you've gotta have zoning, it's gotta have this and this. And we keep saying, but then we have to have a second look at it. It's really hard to spend weeks volunteering to do this and then have somebody else say, and I have had Act 250 on a development. We worked so hard to cite the houses so the neighbors said it didn't comply with our town plan.
So you're in favor
I
of this
think,
work
yes,
because it
I
will
think,
simplify things. Yeah, I
yes.
get it.
It
I
trusts
mean-
the towns.
It trusts the towns.
have the
Our
down-
towns have grown up
Yeah,
since
I-
1960. They now have planning and zoning.
Not all towns.
No, but this is not all towns.
This is an experiment with
This is
downtowns, which are
designated downtown.
pretty heavily regulated.
And they have planning departments and planners and zoners.
Senator Harrison.
So this is similar to the delegation that we've talked about, but just in a particular area. So it's kind of trying it out in
Yeah.
a particular area.
And I just want to honor the work you are and we're doing, and this just has been vetted in the past by
Yeah.
the Senate.
No.
So it was like more expedient.
Is there anything we should be aware of?
Opposition
the-
wise?
Well, just the conversations that went on last year that we should try to make,
I don't know if
this year's language.
I don't think this one wasn't we haven't had a really recent.
This was in S 234 last year as
Oh,
introduced.
okay,
This was
okay.
It was.
because we enabled the permit, I mean,
This
Should
makes a
make
lot
it
of sense to
yeah.
me.
Right, okay,
So if there's anything that we
Yeah.
can learn from last year's effort,
right.
let's do that, which probably you've already thought of, or you've thought of.
No, it's not.
I don't remember where this died.
It died in Senate naturally.
Yeah.
Oh,
Do we know
Because they
why?
didn't like it or because they just couldn't get it out.
I genuinely don't remember. I'm sorry. That
and
bill
those
is
are sometimes the
tiny.
same thing.
we'd have to go back
All right.
and look at the tapes.
Well, it's great that this exists, so I look forward to reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a shorter conversation than I anticipated. People can sit with this, but this has been seen before in the body. And it is the one thing I think we have control over, that we could say, we're making the timeline shorter and more predictable without losing any important criteria for the environment. Okay,
So, Madam Chair,
yes.
before we leave.
Mhm. Oh, you have it. You have
I had something for 17 and which is sadly, Josh is gonna hate. But in the 17 that we
The
had,
17A, you mean?
yes, because we had
So-
originally A and B. So
That's-
I'm operating under all these different.
Yeah, we skipped over this is commercial to residential,
this is
not
commercial
triggering
to-
Act 250 under 25.
Right, so what I thought we were getting much simpler, but we haven't. We've added all this enhanced designation language, which I thought we were just going to be doing 17A for some unknown reason.
Well, 17A and B used to be two different options.
I recognize that.
Okay.
So I thought we were going with 17A, which it does look like.
Well, that was a whole different concept. So now 17B is I don't know if there's
It's a new,
drafting, kind of like we have it in its own new section, but we've chosen 17A between two options about when someone converts a property from commercial to residential anywhere, there's a point at which they do not trigger Act 250.
okay, so my concern is the same. There are commercial properties which could be anywhere. These could be anywhere in our towns.
They're not in the middle of a green field, I don't think.
There are
You know.
some commercial
Okay, but
industrial
there is
parks.
a building there already.
Mhm, right.
It's developed.
Yeah,
It might be a chicken coop, but there's a building there.
But do we want housing there. I mean, we may or may not. I mean, it strikes me that if they are not in the center of town or they're nowhere near a growth center, that you may not want housing there because all of the things we've already talked about, transportation, you know, all these other things. So, I mean, if you are all, I mean, I just am trying to identify that these could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And I do have language that would propose that we include them, that to get this permit, that they would have to be, again, in a growth center or an area that's identified for smart growth. Again, I've seen industrial parks that are in the middle of nowhere. That's my concern.
Okay, so what's the difference if people are driving there every day for a job or if they're driving there every day to live?
There are probably fewer cars driving. Well, you know,
No, not
that's not
necessarily.
my concern. My concern is mostly that they're not growth areas. So Josh, I know. that's-
You know, we're
Anyway, it's my
putting
concern.
everything in growth areas. We haven't addressed the town's main concern is that's going to add a big impact on their schools. We have no help if they have to build an addition to their school.
We would
Or
love
it is
more kids in our schools right now, Ann.
Yeah, but we haven't got any provisions to build or maintain those schools, or the police force, or any of the other municipal services that packing a whole lot of people, we think, into areas has. And I'm not sure we've given, I think the towns need the ability to make some of those calls.
Senator Harrison.
Yeah, I was just, maybe, it can be discussed, but just there's safety considerations sometimes, like bad soils and things like that are acceptable in commercial that aren't in residential, so.
If it was converted to residential, they'd have to mitigate that as part of their permits. I think that what this could do is correct some past zoning practices that were a problem. Here's where a commercial strip is, here's where a retail, here's where industrial, and some of those uses are no longer productive anymore. And so now we have vacant property that could be housing. There's bank buildings that have been sited outside of these designated areas that have converted to housing. There's, I think, opportunities, and I think, you know, what I would this committee, you're the one looking out for the housing, the needs of Vermonters in the future. There's a whole other committee that's gonna look out for the natural resource protections. And what we're seeing is we're not having the housing needed. And any building that already exists that can safely, because it will be required to do all the various permits, convert to housing. If it's already there, I think you're taking advantage of past investments that have been put there: water, sewer, infrastructure, stormwater, pavements, roads, broadband. All those are critical to reuse rather than avoiding that because it's not necessarily in a designated area that we thought about after that development occurred, or for the particular use that wasn't appropriate for a designation. These designations are very specific and very calculated. And there's other development that happens outside of those that could easily serve housing. I can name several in your district, Senator, if you want examples that wouldn't fit in these areas, but converted bank buildings, other commercial property to housing by some of the affordable housing developers that are serving the tenants very well. And they had to pay an Act 250 fee and have those discussions, unfortunately, that I think would be good examples.
Well, I don't think having a discussion is unfortunate. I think it's important, you know.
Well, I just want to say too, we had a fund idea that, oh, let's help with money to convert commercial to residential in the bill, and that's been celebrated for a long time. And then most people said, we're just going to spend that money on permits and Act 250. Like, if you just got that out of the way, it's better than money for us. Which, when do we get to do that? You know, do something for free that builds more housing. Peter.
Hi, thanks. So a couple of comments, I guess, first one is it possible to not say designated downtowns, but rather designated areas so that we get all the other, possibilities?
Are you going back to the enhanced language? Where are you?
I'm sorry. So yeah, 17B, right?
Oh, you're talking, so we were on designated areas, all designated areas, if you had commercial, you could transfer it to residential. That's 17A. But then B is, it's
Just downtowns.
Right, and I had just proposed before we get to
enhanced
B,
designation area.
yeah, that's an,
I don't know what is enhanced designation area different than
Well, I'm
a
saying the designated areas.
Yeah.
Neighborhood development area, when you include neighborhood development areas, village centers, and downtowns as well,
So
growth centers, and
The-
town centers.
the new language in yellow is specific to downtowns.
it's just downtown.
Yeah.
Oh, A and B? I thought
All of
A.
it. So on page 23,
Mm-hmm.
all the yellow language, you did ask for downtowns.
Yes, okay, I might be, maybe I'm confusing myself because I thought 17A was still separately the
is.
question about commercial to residential. Does that exist somewhere else now?
Yes, it's on page 23,
Okay.
line 11 to 12. So line
Oh.
11 to 12 is what was last version's 17A.
Okay,
So, sorry, all the new
Sorry.
language, it's
Mhm.
4 sections of language that's in yellow that relates to setting up the enhanced designation.
that, I don't know if we're all confused or it's just me, but
I'm confused.
I was on Y. My,
you were on
my-
Y, so
my-
we were talking about
Yeah,
Y.
I was, my proposal is for Y.
Okay, and that's what we were talking,
Y, oh, Y, oh, Y, oh.
that a commercial to residential transition doesn't trigger Act 250 if it's 24 units or fewer of housing that are being
So,
created.
and
Yeah.
so yes, and
Mhm.
it's not specific to commercial on
Oh, okay.
because Act 250 permits exist already for, it also would encompass industrial as well as large scale housing development also.
Okay.
Which is why I would, you know, I hear what you're saying. I understand that, you know, that it's already built and that we're repurposing and rethinking it. And, you know, maybe it's a moot point if it's already been built, that we, as opposed to the other one in section 16 where it hasn't yet been built. So I'm willing to withdraw that here.
Getting-
Don't be confused. This has been built. You've just made your argument about this.
No, I was on conversion from,
Commercial to
Commercial to-
residential.
yeah,
That's
and I-
why, that's why here.
that's why.
Mhm. It used to be
Are you on-
17A, so I was just staring
Okay.
at that language.
Yeah, you're in the right spot, right
Yeah.
there.
That just says no permit
Amendment.
amendment
this
is
is for
required for the
commercial or
construction
industrial parks.
improvement of 24 units or fewer.
Yes, and
Okay,
ideally,
I'm
I would
just-
like,
Is that 24 units of individual housing?
yes, correct.
So I could tear down the industrial park and put up 24 single-family units.
Yes.
Unless they're
If
municipal
there
water.
was if there was an existing active 250 permit on the site, yes. A new permit for an exclusively housing, for a housing development of 24 units would not require a permit.
Not for Act 250, you'd have a bunch of other permits.
Yeah.
As Josh points out, you'd have a ton of other,
Municipal would still,
Right.
Yeah.
think about schools,
Okay,
a
no,
lot
this
of schools have been developed outside of these designated areas, and a lot of them are vacant and could benefit from conversion to great housing,
They could.
but they could trigger Act 250, a lot of interest in that community school for 30 years. Having this provision could allow some schools on the outskirts of town, which are already there, infrastructure, great conversions to housing, to not be subject to appeals.
So we have 5 more minutes with Ellen. I want to give 5 minutes to Pat, and then there's a 5-minute little interlude at the end.
There's a question regarding
Yeah.
17B,
Yeah,
subsection BE, bottom page, line 2021. Or any resident of the municipality raises concerns? That seems very broad.
sorry, are you on page 23?
I'm on page 24.
Sure, so we didn't walk through the individual language, but this isn't a full appeal, it's just that concerns raised need to be addressed in the application.
we'll start with that.
Yes.
So this is constraining appeals a bit.
No, this is part of the initial application to get the enhanced designation. There isn't any kind of appeal right here, but it's when
It
the,
says it has to be addressed,
yeah,
whatever that means.
responded to, I was picturing like notice and comment kind of thing, but happy to address that. We didn't talk about the
Narrow
individual, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good flag. So we'll talk about narrowing it before tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to read through all of it. We only have 5 more minutes, but
I think Senator Brock is being.
I will say that another, that we didn't go through individually, but one thing that is not in here, if anyone is a S234 nerd and remembers, there was one provision here that I did strike, which was the ability of any 20 members of the town to appeal. So I did not include that in this because I suspected the committee would not want that.
To appeal a project, not the designation itself.
So where are you?
I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong word. The enhanced designation. So the appeal you're talking about is of a project, of a
No.
specific project.
No,
Oh, to appeal the
The
actual
designation.
designation to
Yes.
the town.
yes. Because there will be no appeal because it's a full exemption.
It's right.
There's
If
no
they
Act
adopt
250
Act 250 criteria,
Correct.
there's a
No
full
Act
exemption.
Well, Act 250 appeal
And so therefore, there could not be an appeal.
by
Yeah.
20, by any 20 people.
But that's only a
There would
one-time
be-
situation.
Right.
That's just the designation.
No,
Right.
Well, hey, again, we're talking about 2 different
Okay,
things,
yeah.
2 different things. A town will apply for a designation. There will be a 30-day appeal window on that. And so there will just be a limited number of people who could appeal. If the designation is granted, there is an Act 250 exemption for the entirety of the area. So there are no appeals on Act 250.
There could be other appeals, I suppose.
The
but
town
not-
appeals, yeah.
But so there's a limited period where somebody could appeal the town designating itself as with this enhanced designation.
Yes.
Right, but then residents would be able to appeal for each project. They'd be able to, there's some process where
not
they could
to Act
appeal.
250.
Just like their
Right,
internal.
but just a regular town.
Yeah.
appeal
Municipal
process.
municipal, permits that would be issued. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have other big sections of change?
So, I mean, we haven't talked about the remaining sections in a while because no changes have been made. So there, after the Act 250 sections, there's the covenant language, the road disclosure language, the wastewater connection permit language, and then also from the last draft, there's this grand list language in section 20.
no, that's where they want it in numerical value so they can, the hot number of units.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I can't remember if we've talked about the concern that Abby Wolford raised.
And we were gonna have
Yeah.
Abby come in, I thought.
I don't think we're gonna address that today.
I flagged it briefly,
Mhm.
and I can try to summarize what she told me, but the phrase residential dwelling units does not currently appear in this chapter in Title 32 related to taxes and the grand list, and so I think primarily they use homestead and
Right, and
non-homestead.
non-homestead.
And so this, she had concerned about using this type of, I don't know if it was just the words, I'm sorry.
If this whole section gets incentive finance, because it's a way bigger issue than you
Yeah,
might
I
wanna
think we
take it out
may be
anyway.
having more than one designation before we leave here.
Right,
So,
There's a number of bills floating around.
right, so
just
we could
one we
address
have.
this in a different bill.
so we're on page 31, at
Yeah.
the top of 31, section 20.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is asking for more on the grand list, which we might be doing in a separate discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if this
Yeah.
is out there, you can remind us that that's something. we
Right. So I'm just,
Or the House could be dealing with it as they look at the
I'm
data.
gonna say
collection.
let's strike it here, and there are other opportunities for us to have this discussion.
Given we have had, yeah.
Yeah,
And the road disclosure, which isn't really
no one has raised it.
People
pertinent
love
to
it.
this.
People love it. It's, when I tell people about it, they love it. So
Yeah.
Yay.
please, let's not strike it.
The ground was piece.
No,
The,
the road
the
The
disclosure.
disclosure of class 4.
Okay.
People love
Got
it.
I'm sorry, you should hire a realtor. I'd lose my license if I didn't disclose that
Who
road.
doesn't disclose? They
I was
have.
just gonna say that is a, a standard practice for realtors.
So we're just underscoring best practice.
Yes.
Is that what we're doing?
And,
Yes.
and for people who don't have realtors.
Yeah.
So this is
Right.
really important. People
is.
really like it.
Yeah.
Especially flat.
Anything else you think is really important, Ellen?
Oh, I don't
For
know.
us to
I
discuss
will
at
say
this
that
moment.
we skipped over sections.
Oh, we did?
I mean, nothing in yellow.
Oh, okay, but yeah, okay. So, and then we have you back for a little while tomorrow for the whole.
The covenants we haven't, we've
Yeah, you have
just,
me for the whole time tomorrow.
and David,
Like, it would be nice if you're here because we have flagged some sections that we're not, and then we can probably let you go at some point early, which, not to be like gracious, right? You know, we want to let you go without you having to stay here through that.
so,
I want to get to Pat, so we can
so
discuss.
whose section is the covenants? Is that David?
No, that's me.
That's you. And it just, before you depart, the only piece in covenants that's changing is at the top of 30.
Yep,
Can you just summarize that for us?
sure. So, this section is an existing piece of law that this committee drafted regarding, adding deed restrictions or covenants to a deed. And so it's
Right.
new deed restrictions or covenants. And so this would be after July 1, 2023. It shall not be valid if they require a minimum dwelling unit size on the property or more than one parking space per dwelling unit. And so this is about private contracts. So a private contract can't dictate more than one parking space or require a minimum dwelling size on the property, essentially in perpetuity.
This isn't a final way a homeowner can get around all of the changes that we're making.
And this is anywhere in a town,
Yeah,
so they can't
want
require
Problem
less.
are we solving?
But it's new deed restrictions.
Mhm.
yeah, it's new deed restrictions.
You're not getting rid of the one that says I can only put colonial architecture on my lot?
No, would you like to?
My brother-in-law, the lawyer, says,
Well,
if everybody else is violating it, you can too.
right, so deed restrictions like that are sometimes put in when a new housing development is
That's what it
constructed,
was.
or there's a homeowners association, or when someone is subdividing their own property and selling it to someone to construct a house, they do sometimes add elements to the deeds of things that cannot be done on the property.
View restrictions. I buy this house, you own the lot next to me, you can't build anything there that will restrict my view of Camel Sun.
So
So
That's not in here.
I
No,
think,
that isn't.
I just
I've
want
seen
us
it.
to have a moment to thank Pat for the spreadsheet of our aspirational appropriations in this bill. It's as up to date as possible from Friday, so people can, do you want to say a few words because then we're
$90
gonna hear from
million,
the
that's all.
make no little plans, channel Daniel Burnham.
Pat Tibbet, titular fiscal office. I actually was able to update that real last minute with some of the changes for this current draft.
I didn't know we changed.
I think there was maybe one change.
Financial change?
That would be David, I don't know.
Okay, okay,
I
oh,
think it was
I didn't know it was like
under-
right now we did that. 'Cause that
No,
would
no,
be
no,
like-
no, no.
It's just with
Okay.
the 20% for ADUs.
So this is as of draft 8.1.
Okay.
Which you're reviewing right now.
Okay, so, yeah,
$90 million.
And so everything in this bill is general funds. So that keeps that simple, and the overall price tag is 90.4 million, according to what I've been able to sum up from all the sections in here. So I know there've been a lot of drafts kind of flying around, so if you see a number that doesn't look quite right, definitely flag it. But
thanks so much,
I
guys.
know you've been.
This is very helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you for
One-
not putting
The
that.
$25 million, that is contemplated to be in addition to the $25 million of the BAA.
yes. Yes.
It's a lot of money.
And this is
we
all
need a
gonna be
lot of
discussed
housing.
tomorrow.
And is it their appropriation for the year?
Yeah, but
The one that we do the notwithstanding stuff?
I have to double check.
That's a good question.
No, I think this is in addition.
Mhm.
So this
I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah,
just to remind that the governors recommend VHB
It's 20.
24 million,
24,
made
okay,
up of two different sources.
okay.
There's one time, and there's
Mhm.
notwithstanding, and then there's capital bill, but it adds up to
Mhm.
24.
So
So it's in addition.
I think this is a notwithstanding, but we can have that.
So I can understand adding compared to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's where the printing press is included as a line item.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give Jen one for Christmas.
So folks, we're in, thank you, Ellen, thank you. We're in the final stages of this bill, hopefully getting it voted out tomorrow. The pro tem is not here tomorrow, so we're just gonna hear from him a little bit on our bill before we vote tomorrow.
Welcome, Philip, to your committee.
Welcome, I should say that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to do what I've done in two other committees. And that is come in and thank you for your work and tell you that I'm excited about your work. We have everything we do is a priority, as you know, but there are three priorities of priorities. And the first was the climate bill, the second was the child care bill, and the third is housing. Those are all three interlocking crises. They are all three things that need attention this time around. The only reason I'm coming in here last of the three, not because this isn't of equal importance, but because of the heavy hitters around the table.
It's the best for last, I thought.
Yes. So, I have great confidence in your work. The experience, I was 4 years on this committee with Senator Cummings. And I know Senator Brock, Allison.
Two of those 4 years for me.
Everybody here, and Wendy has experience in her own right in the housing arena. So I have no doubt the bill will be, perhaps an investment, but also very carefully done and not a hard lift for us, because I think there's agreement across all sectors and all people in the building that housing has to be addressed, that it's at that level of urgency. So again, I thank you. I wish I could be here tomorrow with cake for you. I had planned a cake with
I feel like Ashley's writing cake down here.
with little Monopoly houses on it.
A Monopoly cake.
Yes. But in any event, that's all I had to say, and please carry on, and we'll look forward to your work.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And when you return, we shall have it voted out.
Beautiful. And then I'll be with it on the other side.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Coming to you.
So I think we can end relatively on time. We do have some outstanding questions that I will work to address individually with folks and those sitting
Right,
around the
all of
room.
us.
Yeah. And it's a good question about some of the budgetary items, because we're gonna need to get those where we want them tomorrow with JFO and David's help.
And knowing that more committees will have their crack at it.
Yes, so please, if you can, preview the rest of 8.1 for our discussion tomorrow, because we'll have to have Ellen back to talk about some of these final sections and then go into the second half of the bill. I didn't anticipate meeting Damien, he's kind of on call for those few sections, but flag something if in the fair housing piece or the fire safety piece. Need that. Great work today, committee. We are very close, and I'm really hoping we can get this done tomorrow. And I'll let you go on time, which is kind of a first, actually, the day before we go to this bill. And we'll especially let Senator Cummings go, since she's checking on her husband.
I've only got 5 minutes away.
Well, that's true, but thank you.